the Indonesian prospect of growth. And is there any possibility to be gathered in terms of the uh, future economics of Indonesia? So because Pamitra will be going back today on the afternoon, so maybe we will have a maximum possibility. If Pamitra doesn't mind, we will give Mas Brother Fitra, Dr. Fitra here time for delivering the materials, maybe for around maximum maybe 30 to 45 minutes. So we will have another last 30 minutes to have Q&A session. But if you feel that you have any question in the middle of his presentation, maybe if he doesn't mind, maybe you can just interrupt if you don't mind. We'll like to welcome Dr. Fitra for delivering the material for outlook of Indonesian economy in 2024. The time is yours, Dr. Fitra, for the next 30 and 45 years. Let's give him applause for
Years. 30 years.
oh
Yeah.
for 30 hours. Yes. Yeah, please, Pak Fitra. Time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Very much for your very warm welcome. And thank you for the MC. So you remind me of my series of interview with Astro Awani Malaysia, because with the announcer, so I'm speaking Bahasa and the announcer speaking Malay. Yeah, but we understand each other. Yeah, so that sometimes we have some difficult bit. So it is actually better to do it in English, because in Bahasa we say sit, duduk. Yeah. In Malay, you say duduk is where you stay, right? So it's different thing. And then in Malay, coming to the university is going to the campus. But in Malay, in Bahasa, but in Malay, you call it pengajian, which is here. Is
Religious.
pengajiannya di mana? Pengajian saya di masjid. Okay, so thank you for the invitation. Today I want to give you a brief overview of the Indonesian economy. Just in this time, I want to bring all of you to see what will happen next year, in 2024. So I call this presentation the elusive quest for growth, because every time, everywhere, people are very much focusing on how to achieve high growth. Even the three candidates for the president, they're also having some kind of growth target. We have Anis about 6.5%, Prabowo about 6% or more, and Ganjar is about 7%. So all about growth. But it is actually elusive, because sometimes you achieve it, and most of the time you cannot achieve it, because some things should be considered, in terms of making economic growth calculation. Can I have the clicker? Do you have the clicker? Okay, next. Just a bit overview of what happened for the past 2 or 3 years. Indonesia, starting from 2020, and just like the rest of the world, is experiencing a very major shock coming from the pandemics. And if I'm mistaken, in the second quarter of 2020, the economy grew only. It's not even growing. So we had a contraction about minus 5.3% in second quarter of 2020. And then we have again another contraction in the third quarter, minus 3.49%, which is consensusly speaking. So economists are saying that if you have 2 quarters in a row having contraction, so we can call it as recession. So we had a recession in 2020, and the third quarter minus 3.49%, and it also prolonged in the fourth quarter minus 2%. All in all, minus 2% in 2020. But starting from 2021, the first quarter, although we still had a contraction, but the contraction is actually a bit, slower, about minus 0.7%. And in the second quarter of 2021, we had the 7.07% growth. So by the time of 2021, we say goodbye of the recession because it's actually the ending period of the recession. And from 2021 until now, we have a series of solid growth, about 4 to 5%. Last quarter, the statistical office announced the growth is about 4.94%. It's actually a bit slower compared to the second quarter of this year, 5.17%. But still, we are actually growing for at least 5%. One of the major attributes, or we can call it, it's not idiosyncratic attribute, but it's actually general attribute for all of the nations coping with the crisis, coping with the pandemic. We had the behavioral change that now we are on the verge of using the technology, digital economy even more. So utilizing the digital utilization is actually quite persistent and consistent since the pandemic. Some scholars say that the pandemic is creating is expediting the future of works. The one that we are experiencing now, we have the hybrid session, we have the one in Zoom, the one here, offline, face to face, but we can have it all 100 people outside, still can actually benefited from this lecture. So this type of interaction should be 5 years from now, but COVID expediting all of that possible interaction. And now we have, the behavioral change of the digital economy. Now people are becoming more aware of the technological usage. Coming back again to the growth. Why growth matters? Of course, growth matters for all nations, for all countries. But for Indonesia, we have the task of to escape from the middle income trap. Some papers or some ministerial papers actually suggest that 2045 is our major targets to escape from middle income trap. But this is actually the target that is actually designed because at that time there is actually 100 years of Indonesian independence. So it's actually a bit of a gimmick target. But when it comes to a very technical target, Indonesia still doesn't have much time. It's not even until 2045. The end period is 2038. It's not 2045. Why? Because the basis of escaping from middle income trap, the oil to empower the growth, is the demographic dividend. So the demographic dividend will be ending in 2038, according to some studies. And to do that, Indonesia need to achieve at least 6% of growth on average, right? So according to my calculation, it's actually quite in correspondence with some other targets coming from the ministers and also some other papers. So you can read it from my book in Globalization, Productivity and Production Network in ASEAN, chapter 3 or 4, if I'm not mistaken. So how we can actually escape from middle income trap if we can achieve an average minimum 6% of growth. But the task is actually quite hard. In order to achieve 6% of growth, we need to at least having one variable coming from trade, export growth, from manufacturing sector, more or less 9 to 9.8%. In order to achieve that kind of growth, 6% of growth, which variables actually becoming one of the most dominant variables. We have series of variables, one of which is coming from the trade sector, which is my primary research about trade, international trade. Export growth should be about 9 to 9.8%. In order to achieve 9 to 9.8%, we need to also to achieve the so-called economic efficiency. So we need ICOR, the incremental capital output ratio, at least 5.12 in Indonesia. Nowadays it's about 6. So we need to bring the efficiency even more, because ICOR, incremental capital to output ratio, means that if you have the larger ICOR, means you have, worse efficiency, right? So if the ICOR is becoming bigger, means that your economy is becoming inefficient. But if the ICOR is becoming less, so the economy is becoming efficient. So the target is to achieve economic efficiency. Another um, uh, possible source is also coming from, so export is actually a surplus of production, right? So you already learn it in your class. We have export if we have the surplus of production, meaning that when it comes to production, it is actually all about the industry. Right? So the industrial capacity. In Indonesia, the contribution of the manufacturing sector to the GDP nowadays is about 19%. In the early 2000s, it's about 29%. So Indonesia is having um, a persistent deindustrialization. It's not industrialization, but we have deindustrialization. So it's actually becoming a problem, deindustrialization. Now the contribution is about 18%. So the idea is how to empower the industry through three pillars. So maybe this will become another session, but briefly speaking, these three pillars are infrastructures, the quality of the labor, and then the third one is the quality of the institutions. So these three pillars should contribute to the industrial capacity enhancement. Okay, next. Coming back again to our session today about the economic outlook, but I still need to bring you to the last 2 years or so. So this is an event that happened in 2020 when I was assigned at that time as the advisor and also the spokesperson for the Minister of Trade. I told the minister that um, the Indonesia or the globe, the global world will be facing um, a major disproportional effect coming from the supply and the demand. So the big guys, China, US, the EU, are actually stimulating the economy through fiscal stimulus, monetary stimulus. That is actually helping the economy, but from the demand side. So that creates the demand overshooting. The supply side is actually a bit sluggish because in pandemic time, the factory is not working, right? The labor is, being laid off and so on and so forth. The production is stalled. So the supply is quite sluggish, but the demand is strong, overshooting. So that creates the disproportional growth. So I told the minister, this will actually give us the benefit and also give us a problem. The benefit is coming from the commodity because the commodity itself is now becoming more scarce. Yeah, the resource-rich countries will be actually quite benefited with this kind of problem in the world because we can sell more, yeah, with higher price, right? So that is actually becoming our major source of growth in the pandemic period. Okay? But at the same time, we have several other commodities, oils, or from the energy sectors that should be imported from abroad. So this will actually create also tension for our economy, not to mention for several other sectors. So I told the minister at that time, so we need to be careful. We need to engage more with more or less ASEAN countries, yeah, to empower the regional value chain so that we can actually endure the crisis or the possible recession. So that is actually what I told the minister, and it was actually happening. So we had the problem in the cooking oil, yeah, in 2021. We had also the problem in now we have rice scarcity, yeah. So we need to import the rice and so on and so forth. So the thing is, this is already told, yeah. I already told the minister, but in bureaucracy, yeah, it's quite sluggish, and not to mention that politics is actually give you another problem. Okay, next. Um, so if we decompose for in Indonesian economy, I try to decompose the variables that contributes to the dynamics or the volatility of the economy. So for the last 3 years, COVID is becoming one of the source problem. The contribution is about 17%. The second is inflation, about 15 to 16%. But nowadays, COVID is now not becoming an issue anymore. Yeah, right. So the possibility of having another pandemic is quite thin. So the second factor, the second variable that contributes the volatility in the Indonesian economy is coming from the inflation. And the inflationary tension is also possibly coming from the trade sectors, trade activities. What I told the also the Minister of Trade, we need to be careful. Although we have surpluses in trade, yeah, we have the trade surplus everywhere, anywhere, and for the last announcement from the statistical office, we actually have the 42 times in a row, yeah, of the trade surplus in the Indonesian economy. But the thing is, you know, we need to be careful because most of our export is coming from the commodities and low value added production, and also the input for our industry. Okay, so um, in this period 2020 to 2023, the industrial capacity is not reaching the potential yet. So in that sense, the demand for input production is still actually quite slow or small. So we can actually export the input of production. We can export all of things we need to do production outside. Yeah, you can see the data, our export to China in coals. So we have also the what do you say, steel. Yeah, it's actually quite staggering. Yeah, not only to China but to across other countries. But according to the impulse response function, that if we do that aggressively, we will actually lose our input production in the midterm by the time our industry is growing to its potential. By the time our industry reach the threshold, the input demand will be increasing, but the input is not there. It's already outside because we are exporting all of our important input of production. So at that time, if you want to produce, you need to do import. If you import, given the volatility dynamics in the global conditions, it possibly subject to imported inflation, right? So in that sense, that will pose a threat to the Indonesian economy. The threat is about 0.6 to 0.7% of economic contraction. Instead of growth, we have the economic contraction coming from the trade sector if we are not aware, if Indonesia policymakers are not aware. It's just like Prophet Yusuf used to say, if you have 7 years welfare, 7 years in trouble, so you need to actually save when you are able to do so. When you're saving, you can actually endure the possible recession or a crisis, right? So Prophet Yusuf is actually, the best economist that's ever known in the world because he could forecast 14 years, yeah, 14 years without possible bias. As an economist, usually we are doing an economic forecast within just 1 year. Yeah, possible miss. Yeah, I said maybe about 5.5%, but in reality, it's only 5%. Possible miss, just only in 1 year. But Prophet Yusuf in 14 years, accurate. So the best economist, yeah, that ever known in the world. So, but the idea is when you have the surpluses, you need to be ready for the deficit. it was actually also happening in the period of the post-global financial crisis in 2008. You know that whenever we have the financial crisis, right, the real sector is growing because the financial sector and the real sector sometimes is invest allocation, yeah, to the productive, the most productive sector. So this also happened here. So my warning to the government, especially to the Minister of Trade, you cannot be always happy with the trade surplus because the commodity surplus will come to an end. And at the same time, the productivity should be maintained. So in order to do so, you need to actually, you know, save the input of production in order to produce even more. So that's the thing. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, now we are entering the election period. What happened in every election is actually quite positive for Indonesian economy. The shock is positive. It's not that negative. The shock will be quite effective to boost the economy, right? So this is coming from 2014 and 2019 election event, which is actually, according to my view, that period was actually the period of extreme polarization. Yeah, the right and the left. Yeah, only two candidates. Yeah, from 2014, 2014 and 2019. Now we have three candidates. The polarization maybe is still there, but it's not that much. If we had and if we endure two period of election positively, so I can say that this election will be also positive because this will create the euphoria effect. Especially this is actually just like in 2014 because the incumbent is not running. Yeah, the incumbent is ending the period, and we have the euphoria from the market and also from the people that actually benefited to the economy. And yeah, this suggests that 2024 election should be also positive for the economy. Okay, next. Yeah, this is what I told you earlier that yeah, the commodity cycle, the commodity super cycle will come to an end. Yeah, and the forecast should be just like this, stable. Yeah, in the next few years, but it is not spiking just like we had before. So coming to an end. Um, so this is the inflation tension that I told you before. Um, Now we have the gap between the producer's price index and the consumer price index getting thinner. Yeah, so the gap is not that big. If we compare it with 2022, for example, the production price index and the consumer price index, the gap was actually bigger. Why? Because at that time in 2022, the producer, they are actually facing, a greater tension to the cost of production, but they cannot transmit that to the consumer because they are still seeing that the consumer is still facing problem, and scaring effect from the pandemic. So they are scared that if they actually transmit their price to the consumer cannot buy the product. So what happened in 2022 was actually the period of shrinkflation. You don't have the inflation in the consumer side, but when you buy things, it's actually getting smaller. Yeah, the same product, the same price, but smaller. Yeah, shrinkflation. In 2023, the producers cannot endure it anymore. They transmit it to the consumer side, but fortunately, the government had already, making a series of interventions from the supply side. For example, in August 2022, President Joko Widodo just actually told all of the leaders, from the provincial leaders, the governor, to produce chili. Why chili? Because chili is one that is actually contributed to the inflation in Indonesia. So in Indonesia, if you want to eat something, should be accompanied by chili, right? So it's actually a very idiosyncratic attribute of the Indonesian inflation, chili. So since August, the chili was produced, but what was actually established, and it takes about 3 months, yeah, to harvest the chili. And in September and October, we had a deflation in chili because the supply side intervention. At the same time, in September, we actually adjust the oil price, yeah, in the market, so that even we have a spike in the administered prices, but coming from the food volatility is becoming smaller.
Oh my God.
And the government also making some other series of supply side
Cek
intervention
dulu ya kak ya,
that actually
biarkan
minimize
tadi.
the effect of the
Aku
producers
hapus dulu ya kak ya,
transmitting.
karena etalasinya sudah full lah kak. Jadi aku hapus dulu. Sebentar
Ada
ya.
meeting.
Ya Allah, cuman
Betul.
ya.
Oh, this fourth quarter of the year. But we can also have a possible lower bound, about 4.9%. But maybe
my feeling, my gut feeling is, this year's sometimes some percentage around 5.05%, right? So we still grow about 5%, but it's not that much. But it's still very fortunate, yeah, given all of the variables coming in the global economic conditions. And for 2024, slower pace, yeah, not as much as in 2023, not because our domestic capacity is actually slowing, no. Our domestic capacity, Indonesian domestic capacity is quite robust, but the thing is, the global economic condition is still gloomy, yeah. But we might expect a possible rebound in 2025, according to some projection, global economic projections coming from the IMF, World Bank. They're actually seeing 2025 as the period of rebound. 2024 is the period of slower growth globally. So with that, we also have the effect of this slower demand, the slower growth here also happening in Indonesia. The lower bound is about 4.8%. The upper bound is about 5.04%. Just a few days ago, INDEF, if I'm not mistaken, also have the projection about 4.8%, 2024. So it's actually the lower bound of my forecast. But I can say that we can still grow about 5%. So it depends on what actually coming in 2024. Now, coming back again to the stimulus that I told you earlier. The stimulus creates the inflation, the global inflation, right? But the one that is actually creating the major stimulus is the big boys, US, Europe, China, Japan, right? So US is one of the major proponent of the stimulus. And at first, at the earlier times, Janet Yellen, Jerome Powell, they were seeing that the inflationary tension is only transitory. Yeah, transitory is just fine. We won't raise any interest rate because we need to stimulate the economy even more. Not until 2022, when we have this geopolitical tension between Russia and Ukraine. From that time, the US are saying that this inflationary tension is no longer transitory. It's more to a runway inflation. So we need to take care about things to cope with inflation. So they are the one. They were the one that started the period of the inflationary, global inflation. Now they are also the major culprit that create the systemic demand destruction all over the world. Because when they raise the interest rate, this create the bandwagon effect throughout all of the central bank. Most of the central bank response actually the same. They also raise the interest rate. So when we raise the interest rate globally, the global demand is actually shrinking. So that also creates tension to the global world and the potential of the global world recession. Yeah, coming from the epicentrum of the policy makers, the flip-flop policy coming from the US. Okay, next. Next. As I told you before, the trade should be taken care of. The trade surplus for Indonesia is getting thinner, but it is still surplus. So, but it's okay as long as we can actually, change the dynamics. It's no longer exporting commodities, but now we are exporting the industrial products, the value-added products. It's okay. Yeah, so we can actually achieve a more sustainable growth through industrial activities. Next. Next. Yes, this one. What happened in the world today is the phenomena that is called friendshoring. The US, EU, yeah, are actually trying to, reducing economic and trade activity to China and also Russia, because they're seeing maybe China and Russia is, they are at the same cluster. be it ideological cluster maybe, or economic cluster. So they're seeing that China and Russia is their enemies. So does the China and Russia also seeing the US and the EU nowadays as their possible threat. So they're actually also, reducing economic activities to the US and also to the EU. So the one that has actually benefited from this tension, from the friend-sharing activities, is the ASEAN countries. Why ASEAN countries? Because ASEAN is quite neutral. ASEAN have the ASEAN way. We can be with China. We can also be with the US. So we are actually the hub, regional hub, to actually get all of the investment and trade activities. But still, the endurance modes should be actually tested. Just recently, Xi Jinping just actually visited EU, to actually pitch the friend-shoring activities. Can you become my friends again? Yeah, because now Xi Jinping, China is now saying that this is actually becoming a possible threat for also the Chinese economy. So they also see that this friend-shoring activities is not working well for them. So of course, ASEAN still can be benefited from the activities. We can have the relocation factor, but still, I believe that in the near future, maybe they will become friends again because at the very least, the economic variables is actually provide you the same interest. It's actually the lowest common denominator for all possible parties. Next. Okay, next. From the industry, we have the industrialization, just like what I said to you earlier. Next, next. So now Indonesia is trying to actually develop the industry, the downstreaming activities. Yeah, one of which coming from nickel. Yeah, we have the series of downstreaming action in nickel sector. The data suggests that starting from 2004, 2015 to 2019, I exclude the pandemic period. So at that time, our stainless steel export, the growth is about 188%. Why stainless steel? Because you have nickel. If you process the nickel, becoming ferronickel, so you combine it with chrome, combine it with steel, you can create the stainless steel. So stainless steel is actually the chain, the next chain from the nickel side. So from that, we can actually tell that if you actually, produce, you create some kind of downstreaming strategy, will create value for your export. 188% of average export growth per year, starting from 2015 to 2019, is actually telling you that the industrialization strategy is the one strategy that can actually, enhance the economic growth. But the thing is, as I told also some other, policymakers, that this won't be a single undertaking. We cannot actually rely from just one sector. We need to expand to other sectors, not only from mining sectors, but also, for example, agricultural sectors that create more inclusive activities, especially to the farmers. Because most of the poor people in Indonesia, actually, they are farmers. So in order to actually, level up their welfare condition, we need to actually, increase their skill capacity and also industrialize and increase the value-added production coming from the agricultural sector, so that the welfare effect or the net welfare gain will be positive. Next. Another indicators is coming from the construction sector. So why we are bringing up infrastructure project everywhere? Because infrastructure will become one of our source of growth, and it will also create a foundation, for the industrial expansion. You need roads, you need ports, you need bridges, you need dams in order to, expand the industries, in order to empower the industrial ecosystem. Next. But the thing is, when you invest in infrastructure, when you spend in infrastructure, you need to be aware that the time towards having the return or the impact from the infrastructure project is actually quite, in the midterm, not in the short term. If you actually calculate the short-term measurement, short-term efficiency is not efficient. Yeah, the all ICOR, incremental capital output ratio, when you spend, and then you can see the output is not there yet. But this is becoming the core. This is becoming the hub of all of the other activities that surround the infrastructure. When you have roads, you have economic activities, but not in the short term. You need to, expand your suburb. 3, 4, 5 years, maybe we can have the economic activities. But we need the infrastructure. Next. Another sector that is actually slowly becoming our maybe another source of growth is coming from the technological sector. This is when I have the presentation in the Department of Mathematics in UCSD. When with my colleagues, we actually create some kind of the econophysics modeling, of disruptive innovation. So, do you know Solo growth model? You already know in your class. We have the model of the economic growth, one of which is called the Solo Swan growth model. And with my colleagues coming from Venus University, actually my friend, we met each other in Japan. So he was actually taking his PhD in quantum computing. So we talk a lot, and then we actually create this kind of interaction, and we have the econophysics equation. We call it the Dirac-Solow-Swan model of economic growth. So what I'm trying to say is, from this model, it is suggested that when it comes to innovation, innovation is quite perpetual. Disruptive innovation is perpetual. So you have innovations for innovations for innovations, disruptions over disruptions over disruptions. This is true because we have the coupled differential equations, which is actually unlimited. Coupled differential equations, meaning that we have disruptions over disruptions over disruptions coming everywhere. In reality, empirically speaking, in Indonesia, you're seeing what the equation suggests. We had at first Shopee, Bukalapak. We have also Tokopedia, right? E-commerce that was disrupting the incumbents, disrupting the traditional stores, right? Right. Now, and then they slowly becoming the monopolists, but not in a very long time. We have TikTok Shop, social commerce. We have the commerce and the social media combined all together, disrupting all the e-commerce. And if you are seeing the social media, we have one in my time. We had Friendster, only text, and then we had Facebook. You can post your photo, and we have videos, and all. This is quite perpetual, right? So when you're on top, maybe 2, 3, or maybe 4 years ahead, there will be some new entrants that will be actually disrupting the market. So disruptions is perpetual. And the another way to see it is the source of growth are actually quite unlimited, right? Coming from this technological disruptions, and technology is slowly becoming an enabler of the other sectors to be engaged even more. So, in order to achieve that kind of growth, it can be coming from the trade, it can be coming from the industrial sector, it can also coming from the technological sector. But we need to be aware. According to Richard Baldwin, from his two books, the first is The Global Economic Convergence, The Great Convergence. The second is about the globotics upheaval. We have the globalization and robotics coming all together, not only globalization, but also robotics. Now you can do your work with ChatGPT, right? It's okay, right? Can you do you allow ChatGPT here?
Yeah.
In my class, I allow all the students to use ChatGPT, but because ChatGPT is just like calculator in the old days, right? It actually um, make your life easier. We have the globalization and robotics coming all together. It creates upheaval, globotics upheaval. So we have job displacement, of course. But Baldwin also suggests that we have the job displacement, but maybe in the future we can have a job creation, new jobs coming that maybe can compensate the job displacement. According to McKinsey in Indonesia, uh, we have through this technological disruptions, there will be possibly about 10 to 20 million of jobs being displaced or replaced to 2020 2030. There's actually many, yeah, 20, not jobs, yeah, 10 to 20 million of people going to be displaced out of work, right? But the same study also suggests that there will be 30 to 40 million of people coming to the new economic activities. So we have a surplus of 20 million until 2030. But we need to be aware which one of us, yeah, the one that is actually to be displaced or the one that is actually replacing the old jobs. So there is actually how the government need to cope with the possible threat of technology as well as the possible benefit of the technological disruptions. Next. Next. Okay. Yeah. Thing is, yeah, technology is just like, do you know Interstellar? Yeah, no, Interstellar. So this is the scene when the pilot coming to um, unmanned planet, and then facing a tidal wave, and we have the tidal wave, and this is the pod, the escape pod. So it's actually depend on us. Can we actually use the technological disruptions, or we are actually being dominated with the technology? Can we be the next Skynet, just like in Terminator, or maybe we can have the so-called Babylon 5, one that is actually utilizing the technology for the human needs. So it depends on us. Yeah, it's just like Zuck and Elon Musk controversies just a few years ago. Yeah, about AI. AI will kill humanity, or will actually we can utilize humanity. In 2017, when I attend a seminar in Silicon Valley, yeah, but Zuckerberg versus Elon Musk, just way before we had this Chat GPT hype. So at that time, there was a conversation about whether or not we can actually utilize AI. It's actually the conversation between Zuckerberg and also Elon Musk. And Elon Musk just actually withdrew from the project, because from the OpenAI project, because he's saying that this will kill humanity. But Zuckerberg said that no, I think the technology, it depends on the human, the man behind the gun. If we can actually utilize it, we can actually becoming more productive than before. Next. Okay, next. Okay, maybe we can just skip to the last part of the slide. Next. Okay. Previous. Um, no, no. Okay, this one. This is interesting. This is actually a typical Indonesian. We have the so-called the program that is called PKH. PKS, program Keluarga Harapan. It's actually just the intervention for the um, uh, poor people, yeah, coming from the minister. But this PKH, if it is empowered effectively, this actually can actually bring, yeah, the subsistence level of farming more to the industrial mode. Yeah, PKH. So I said to several other teams in the presidential nominees, I said that why don't you just actually utilize PKH and we can actually, speed up the industrialization, because actually this is actually one way, yeah, to get actually an advancement in growth. Next, the last part. The last part. Okay, so no. So this is the summary, yeah, from what I've been saying to you, just about 30 to 40 minutes. So we have now the industrialization, the labor productivity is quite limited. So we need to actually increase that in order to increase our export performance. If we can increase our export performance, we can actually participate even more in the global growth, in the global value chain, the global production network. So we can have actually a more open economy that actually can benefit it from the global economic conditions. Then that is actually the way to escape from the middle income trap. That is actually the existential threat for current and maybe the future Indonesian economy. Thank you for your time, and then let have a good Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Pak Fitra. It's very enlightening presentations. So he has been speaking almost 1 hour, but
Oh.
seems to be not very. We are still very interested. Yeah? Interesting to hear from him, because we see that Pak Fitra here combined between academic perspective and also the practical perspective. So we have both sides income come to into a single picture. And if you look from his presentation just now, that seems to be the prospect of the future Indonesian economy is still prospective, is still good. Because he said that maybe in the next year, we still have 5 to 5.5%. And also it will be maybe some also government policy how to boost this growth, yeah, by looking at the demand side and also the supply side. Before I pass to you the Q&A session, I have one maybe not question but just to get your views, Pak Fitra. Regarding what you said that seems to be in the earlier you say about the business cycle actually. So in my class in macroeconomics, we learn much on the business cycles, because in the end of the day we have to understand the cycle. So when we are and what the policy is that must be taken by the government, because the government policy must be based on the when and where the cycle is located, whether in the maybe in the right side or the left side, or maybe in the optimal position, in the peak positions. That you mentioned in the earlier that in the context of the government labor, or sorry, demographic policy, that before it reaches the optimal position, it would be maybe difficult to be reach the potential, because seems to be the resource has been gone because of the another shocks. And you said also earlier that seems to be there is a dilemma, which one that policy must be based, whether one side or another side, because we have to sacrifice one side by maybe letting another side to be gone. So my question is, Pak Fitra, to you is, when actually the current state of the Indonesian economy in the cycles, whether in the boom side or bust side, because by looking at that, we will know that what the policy must be taken by the government, whether the pro-cyclical policy or counter-cyclical policy. And also it is related also with the second position. The second question is, if we have understood the positions, actually, what is the optimal range of the growth that the Indonesian government must reach, Pak Fitra, so that you see that by looking at that optimal position of range, so we may maybe the list also what should be the growth of the manufacturing sectors, and also the another sectors. I think it is my curiosity, Pak Fitra. And then the third one, maybe if the cycle has been identified, then what the best policy option that should be taken by the government right now? Or whether must be in terms of interest rate, maybe must be following by the U.S. Economy, or maybe we have our stance. That's perhaps my curiosity, Pak Fitra. Before I pass to the audience.
Okay, thank you, Dimas, for your difficult question. Okay, as I already mentioned to you, that the commodity boom is now becoming to an end period. So, with that in mind, so we're seeing that in 2024, it's actually a bit slower. With that in mind, so we don't have the boom period anymore. So, what types of policy that is actually best match, yeah, to actually counter this period of slow growth? Empirically speaking, counter-cyclical policy always actually champion the output. Pro-cyclical policy is, only, if we are growing with pro-cyclical policy, we can have some kind of bubble. If we have a recession with pro-cyclical policy, we have the, deepened recession. So the best response, empirically speaking, is always coming from the the counter-cyclical policy. Yeah, but that is only true in the short run. Just like Keynesian overview of how the government should intervene in the short run. But I must say I agree with Keynes because in the long run we are all dead, right? So we cannot actually foresee the long run. What we need to actually handle is what happened now, right? So with that, the counter-cyclical policy is actually more effective. So what about the growth potential, right? 5% is actually enough, or maybe we can reach more than 5%. According to the Haldreick-Prescott filter simulation,
Yeah.
the gap between the actual and potential output is now becoming, thinner, is about 1%.
Okay.
So maybe we can actually grow to 6%, but more than 6% will create economic overheating, right? So that I also told this to Tim Anies, Tim Ganjar, and also Tim Prabowo. When you set the growth target, you need to be aware of the possible economic overheating period. Yeah, because if you set your target is too much, and you want to try 7% of growth, but at the expense of inflation, at the expense of maybe rupiah's depreciation, maybe we can hit 20,000 per US dollar in rupiahs. So it's actually quite bringing a systemic risk, for the Indonesian economy. But if we can try hard towards searching for other source of growth, for example, the one that I told you before about the technology route, this will actually create productivity. When you create productivity, this will actually create becoming the shock absorber of the possible economic overheating period. So when you can achieve 6.5%, 7% growth, it should be coming from the technological route, from the productive sector. So without that, we can only face economic overheating.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fitra. So this one is very important answer from Pak Fitra, because if we have more than 5% or 6%, we'll have the overheated economy, because we have to look for the optimal balance of the economy. So we have the intervention period, intervention bands. So if you see the slide from Pavitra in the forecasting, he has low upper bound and lower bounds. So actually, this is the threshold. This threshold must be in place. So in my understanding, when we study economics, we have shock and vulnerabilities in economics, and this shock and vulnerability must be combined and integrated into optimal positions. So if Pavitra just mentioned about the another source of growth, by looking at technology, it means that he make conditions of the shocks. So the shocks maybe must be in condition between this and this. So this condition must be integrated with the certain condition with the economy. So this conditional economy must be integrated into single picture and will be creating the optimal position where the economy should be in the in the business cycle. Okay, so I give you another lectures because it is my lecture in macroeconomics. But I give you a chance now, time to question him, or maybe you have any queries, maybe you have any questions in mind regarding what he has presented, or maybe you have any information from the news that you need some confirmations. Please, we have another maybe 30 minutes. Okay, I feel first. The second questions, maybe. Please don't hesitate. Okay, for meeting for others, please introduce yourself, Mas Afil, where you come from, and please direct your question to him briefly. Okay, so do you start? Okay, yeah.
Ini yang online juga tadi.
Okay, the online perhaps. Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot. The online participant also, if you have questions, you may raise your hands, yeah, and you may also ask a question. Okay, please, Mas Afil.
Nyalain dulu. Nyalain dulu.
Introduce yourself first.
So, my name is Antoine Villalobos. So, the global economy, of course, we are also talking about the situation that has occurred in the global school recently, or is happening right now. So, my question will be: are there issues related to international trade that affect the Indonesian economy? And if so, do you think what kind of global issue affect the Indonesian economy? That's all.
Okay. Will you answer the question, or we will wait for the online participants? Do you have any question, the online participants?
If any, okay.
Mas Rizky, you can check the participants rooms. Perhaps is there any raise hand participants? No. Okay, Mas Fitra, you can just.
Okay, thank you. Historically speaking, the trade is not too dominant in the Indonesian economy. We are quite, comparatively speaking with, for example, Thailand, Malaysia, um, even Vietnam nowadays, and the Philippines. You can see it in my book in chapter in Globalization Productivity version in chapter 1. The overall global participation for Indonesia, the network or the Russian network, is below all of the already mentioned countries. So we are left behind in that sense. So in the period of global growth, we cannot actually having a good benefit out of it. And so we of course we can actually utilize the consumption, domestic consumption, because that is actually our um, quite popular contributors to our Indonesian economic growth. But we need to also expand the portfolios. Of course, consumption is good, but we need also to be internationalized in order to, enhance or to grow even more. Because consumption alone cannot bring you or cannot actually bring you to the period of, to escape from the middle income trap, just like I mentioned to you earlier. So the problem is today
is how we can actually enhance trade sectors to create export growth out of the value-added production, not from the commodity side, but from the value-added production in order to boost growth. Without doing that, we are trapped. We are trapped in the middle income. So, what happens if we are trapped? You will become old without ever becoming rich. So that is actually our goal till 2033. So that is why we need to carefully expand the portfolio of growth, not only coming from the consumption, but also coming from other sectors. Trade route is one of the possible route. Another thing, just like what I said to you earlier, this trade expansion should be also empowered by the technological expansion in order to create, a major mm, foundation, yeah, to our sustainable growth in the future. Not to create economic overheating period, but to actually become a buffer. Yeah, the technology will become an enabler and also acting as a buffer for other potential in terms of the economic overheating period. So coming back again to your questions, what about the trade sectors? The trade sectors now the contribution is still quite limited, although we have experiencing the period of trade surplus 40 times in a row, but still because it's still coming from the commodities, it's not that productive. So we need to expand that side.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fitra. I guess you need to look at the macroeconomics identity or the gradient of GDP, Mas. So you have CIG, X, and M. So if I said to my student that we have to look for, so what is the optimal position of the CIG, X, and M in order to create the optimal GDP growth? Yeah, because if you understood that position, so you can create any value. So to what extent then the GDP here, for example, 5%, it is a six, in order to reach 6%, how much the growth from the CIGX min M? So you make a certain condition. So so historically speaking, then you need some exercise, some empirical evidences and others. Okay, thank you, Pak Fitra, for the enlightening answer. So do you have any other question, please? So we have maybe 20 minutes more. From the international student, perhaps, here we have full-time student from, okay. Okay, so have two students there. Please introduce yourself and please directly your questions to the to Pak Fitra briefly.
My name is Alfaizi Putra Pakutuman from I want to ask two questions. So the first question is that because of the increase in the utilization of the technology and also the rise of the e-commerce at the same time, can it be actually seen that our people are actually developing consumerism behavior based on that fact? And is it actually like good to our economic growth? And my second question is that regarding the friendshoring activity, uh, talking about the recent events that are happening right now between Israel and Palestine, we have clearly seen that Indonesia is actually taking side, not actually taking side, but showing the support to Palestine and the U.S. Clearly showing their support to Israel to back our neutral stance, friendshoring activity between the peoples. Very much.
Thank you, Faiz. Please, brother. Waalaikumsalam.
My name is Ilya. I'm a student in department. And I have a question for you, sir. About our life. And it's covered by your life qualification. My question would be regarding the theory of recommendation you mentioned about, like in 2024, the IMF and the World Bank, they said that the world will pay for economic growth. So my question will be, what are the measures that Indonesian government can to make sure, like the economic growth of Indonesia will at least be above 5.0, even though we want to do that, that will be low economic growth.
Are there questions from the online participants? Rizky? No, okay. So we have three questions, Pak Pitra. The first, technology and commerce, and in terms of the stance between the Israel and different support from Israel and Indonesian stance. So what the impact on the um, relationship between this country? Maybe impacting to the trade perhaps or economy. And the last one is what the policy response, looking at the maybe the lower prospect in the 2024. Three interesting questions.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your question. The first one is about the e-commerce and consumerism. Um, so yes, of course, we are seeing greater transaction, yeah, within the period of pandemic, yeah, in digital platform. Anecdotally speaking, I have some friends in startups when they actually say that um, they have over 400 to 500% of interactions and also transaction happening during the year of pandemic, which is actually quite staggering. Anecdotally speaking, maybe on average we have on average 18 to 100% of growth, yeah, in terms of transaction, and also that goes along with consumption. And is it good? Yeah, of course, in the short run, if we have a greater consumption, that is actually quite good for the economy. Because, for example, just in the second quarter this year, our consumption growth is the first time since the pandemic period grew much better than the economic growth itself. So in quarter two, it's about 5.7% of economic growth, and the consumption is about 5.3%. And in the third quarter, the economic growth 4.94%, and the consumption is about 5.07%, if I'm mistaken. So two times in a row, the consumption growth grew more than the economic growth, and that actually becoming the prime drivers of the economy, because 54 to 55% of the overall contribution of growth is coming from the consumption. But one needs to be aware that in the midterm, in the long run, if you are only becoming a market, yeah, this will becoming an existential threat for the economy. Because when you are becoming the market, if you're seeing from the current account will be posing a deficit. If we have a deficit current account, of course, this is the one and possible way to actually having a possible economic contraction also. So in a way that consumption is good, but you need to also be, it need also to be accompanied by productivity coming from the industry. So e-commerce is good, okay, as long as we can also produce the goods. But e-commerce will become a threat to the economy if most of the goods coming from abroad, right? So in that sense, it should be simultaneously treated in a way that we need to increase the industrial capacity without actually, declining the period of high consumption. So high consumption is good, but we need also to increase our industrial capacity so that we can have a more sustainable growth in the future.
With regards to the friendshoring activities, I think because friendshoring, ASEAN nowadays is still actually neutral in a way that we are seeing that the Israel and Palestine conflicts it's not that we are actually with Palestine or with Israel. No, we are actually with humanity, right? So it goes with all other countries except for the U.S. For the less actually less decision from the UN. It's only the U.S. that actually say no to the ceasefire. Even France now is saying yes, right? So it's them with the rest of the world. So yeah, with that in mind, it's not friendshoring anymore. So another way to see it that we're still actually, you know, keeping in touch with the US, and the US still needs Indonesia. Why? Because Indonesia also because Indonesia is the biggest country in ASEAN and biggest Muslim countries also, and ASEAN as the regional hub for from the east and the west. The consolidation, the regional hub is here, so they still need us. The US now is using in Indo-Pacific Economic Framework that also includes ASEAN countries. In this part, Japan and China, surprisingly, they have also ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific, right? All include ASEAN. So this is quite inclusive to ASEAN. So in a way that ASEAN now is actually becoming, the best point, yeah, to meet. They cannot meet in China, they cannot meet in Europe, they cannot meet in other region, but ASEAN, because we are friendly to to everyone. So they are actually quite okay to consolidate in ASEAN. So in a way that I think we won't have any problem, yeah, when we take sides with humanity. Um, so for the next question about the how to cope with the low economic growth period, slower growth, period of slower growth. One of the major source to do that kind of intervention is coming from the state budget. As I mentioned to you earlier, we have this so-called intervention that is called counter-cyclical policy. When the economy is becoming slower, so the budget deficit is becoming bigger because yeah, we spend more in order to boost the economy. This also happened in the pandemic period. In Indonesia, we have a very big stimulus, although it's not comparable to the one that is in the US. But this very stimulus in 2020 and in 2021 is the one that is actually helping the economy. Because if you, Dimas mentioned to you earlier about the consumption, investment, government spending, yeah, trade activities. In the pandemic time, investment negative growth, consumption also negative, trade positive is because of the commodity boom. The government spending is also positive. And according to my simulation in 2020, without the government intervention, maybe the economy will be having a negative 4% contraction instead of negative 2%, minus 2% in 2020. So the effect is actually quite significant when it is effective. When you spend in the best allocative manner, so it's actually
Okay, thank you, Pak Fitra. Hopefully, your question has been answered by Pak Fitra Joe, yeah, and also Ais. We still have 10 minutes left before 3 p.m. Maybe still anybody here have a questions? Please, online participants, maybe you have any question in the room chat? Clear. Okay, clear, yeah. Okay, so but before I end this session, Pak Fitra, I interested when you said that about the modeling, when you had collaboration with the colleagues from Japan. Could you please elaborate a little bit? This model also is able to create any interval threshold that maybe connect to the optimal positions, and how this model working actually. Just a bit. I'm curious for this.
Yeah. So basically, it's economic growth model combined with quantum physics model. So the Dirac equation model, we combine it with the Solo-Swan growth model. It's a bit of a theoretical modeling.
Yeah.
It's not to forecast the exact number, but we create some kind of wave, a technological wave. Yeah. We call it the perpetual or the coupled differential equations. That is actually telling you that innovation is perpetual. If innovation is happening
Continuously.
every time, everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So in that sense, in my other perspective, we are sensing that because the innovation can be perpetual, so the source of growth can also be perpetual.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fitra. So this is interesting modeling, because economists, the main strength of this economics is we have to be able to predict. Yeah, even though it's not exact in the future, but at least we know the possibility of the truth, yeah, that will be happening in the future. Therefore, if you learn about economics, you learn about assumptions. Yeah, so we always telling the student about assumptions. So not the exact details, yeah, because economics is dynamic knowledge and science, and always up and down based on the situation and conditions. But the main essence of economics is be able to model. We simplify such situations so that we can you can give the um, describing activity in the future. What should be the best values, the best interval, so that we can create a policy response based on that situations. So once again, that we give applause to Pak Fitra. So we are so glad and humble to have him today. Yeah, hopefully it's not the last time for him to visit us. Yeah, because looking at his presentation,
I think last time three presidential candidates actually presented
not
in
here,
but
in
UMY,
other Muhammadiyah universities,
not UMY,
not UM1.
but under
Yeah,
Muhammadiyah. But
Surakarta, Jakarta, and also one in the Surabaya.
UMY need to also invite.
Okay, thank you, Pak Fitra. So we have come to the end of the discussions at 3 p.m. So I guess that the conclusion here is there is still a good prospect for growth, yeah, in Indonesia in next 2024, based on his explanation from this discussion, that there is maybe 5% percent growth in the next 2024. But for sure, there are so many challenges that must be taken by the government, particularly related with the counter-cyclical policy. Yeah, so that's the main idea that he mentions. And the next one is there are some challenges that the Indonesian government is facing right now, particularly in terms of the labor productivity, income traps, yeah, and also the regionalisms, and also the technological disruptions. So all these things, based on his term, root of technology or root of growth. So it can be maybe expanded or maybe modified. So maybe we could have more economic growth in the future. But all in all, we have to be optimistic that next year will be better and also will be more prosperous, because we will be having political elections, and hopefully this election will push economic of growth in Indonesia will be going better. I close this session by giving with pantun. jalan-jalan ke Yogyakarta istimewa. Mampir ke kampus UMY Muda Mendunia. Bersyukur sekali hari ini bertemu Pak Fitra. Semoga dapat bertemu kembali untuk mencerahkan semesta. Terima kasih Pak Fitra sekali lagi. Thank you very much for your time here. Terima kasih for all the audiences here from the Master Economics, Bachelor Economics, and also from other departments. So hopefully from his presentations you'll be enlightened and inspired and motivated. So what will be the next year event in Indonesia? See you again in the next discussions, and thank you again Pak Fitra. Give applause again to Pak Fitra. I hand over back to MC. Silakan Mbak.
Thank you, Dr. Dimas, for your amazing moderating session. Before we go to the next agenda, we would like to invite Dr. Dimas to present our souvenir of our appreciation to Dr. Faisal.
Ini aja ya, atau di depan? Depan. Di depan sini. Ini ya Mas, sekedar untuk mengingatkan tentang kita Mas, tentang UMY. Oh, enggak ke kiri. Ya. Ya. Oke. Ya. Ya. Oke, terima kasih Mas Fitra. Ini yang mana ya? Nanti aja. Terakhir. Nanti aja foto. Oke, nanti aja. Kita foto bersama yuk di depan. Sini foto bersama. Cukup nggak kira-kira Mas? Cukup ya? Ya, di belakang lagi ya mungkin ya. Nanti ada yang di belakang, ada yang di depan mungkin agak sedikit duduk gitu. Ayo ke depan, let's go. We take picture together. Sini aja Mas, ya. Mas mending duduk aja mungkin. Kita duduk aja. Yang lain berdiri di belakang. Yuk, ayo silakan. Yuk kita foto sebentar. Ini masuk media nanti, masuk media massa.